Stop. Just stop for a moment. Before you scroll away, take one slow breath. Because you may be standing closer to a major career shift than you realize. Something has been changing around you. Maybe you have felt it lately. You look at your work differently. You no longer feel excited by things that once mattered to you. A job you once wanted suddenly feels too small. A path you worked hard to build no longer feels like your path at all. And maybe you have been asking yourself, why do I feel so restless? Why does something inside me keep telling me that change is coming? What if I am making the wrong decision? Listen carefully. You are not necessarily lost. You may simply be outgrowing the version of yourself that chose your current career. And that changes everything. You see, most people wait for a clear sign before they move. They wait for the perfect opportunity, the perfect offer, the perfect moment. But sometimes the shift begins long before the opportunity appears. First, something inside you changes. Then, your attention changes. Then, your choices change. And finally, your life begins responding to those choices. Think of an old radio. The station is already broadcasting, but if you are tuned to the wrong frequency, you hear nothing but static. That does not mean the signal disappeared. It means you are no longer tuned to it. And maybe that is what has been happening to you. You have been trying to force yourself to stay on a frequency that no longer matches who you are becoming. You may have felt tired after work for reasons sleep could not fix. You may have watched someone else succeed and felt something strange inside you. Not jealousy, but recognition. A quiet thought. If they can do that, maybe I am capable of something more too. Then you push the thought away. You told yourself to be realistic. You told yourself to stay where it is safe. You told yourself that changing direction would mean admitting you had wasted years. But here's the truth. Sometimes the life you outgrow is not a failure. It is proof that you grew. Let that sit with you for a moment. Because there is a reason this message found you now. You may be entering a threshold. And a threshold is strange. One door is closing behind you. But the next door has not fully opened yet. That space can feel like confusion. It can feel like failure. It can feel like nothing is happening. But something is happening. You are being forced to question what you once accepted without question. And that is where the story of Izara begins. Izara had spent years building a career everyone around her considered successful. Her desk sat high above a crowded city, surrounded by glass walls and endless lights. Every morning, she arrived early. Every evening, she left late. People admired her discipline. Her manager trusted her. Her family was proud of her. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But every night, when the office became quiet, Izara would stare at the city through the window and feel something she could not explain. One evening, she stayed after everyone had gone home. The lights of the city flickered below her like thousands of tiny signals. She opened her laptop. Her promotion email was waiting. A bigger title. More money. More responsibility. Everything she had supposedly wanted. Her hand rested on the mouse. She should have smiled. Instead, she whispered, "Why doesn't this feel like winning?" Then something unexpected happened. The office lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then every screen in the room went black. Izara stood up. For a few seconds, the entire floor was silent. Then her laptop screen came back on. But the promotion email was gone. In its place was a single sentence. "You are closer to your real path than you think." Izara froze. She had never seen those words before. She reached for the keyboard. And another line appeared. "Do not accept what you are about to be offered tomorrow." Her heart began pounding. Because tomorrow, she was supposed to sign the biggest career agreement of her life. And suddenly, the future she had spent years building did not look like a future anymore. It looked like a warning. But who had sent the message? And why did it know what was happening tomorrow? More importantly, what if Izara's career was not about to grow? What if it was about to completely change direction? And what if the same threshold is already appearing in your life? Quietly. Right now? There is something you need to understand before you make your next move. And once you see it, you may never look at your career the same way again. The next morning, Izara woke before her alarm. She had barely slept. That strange message kept replaying in her mind. Do not accept what you are about to be offered tomorrow. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. For years, she had dreamed about this moment. So why did one sentence make her afraid to reach it? She almost laughed at herself. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe someone had played a stupid joke. Maybe she was simply exhausted. But deep inside, she knew it was something else. She got ready and went to work. The moment she entered the office, her manager called her into his room. He smiled. "Congratulations, Izara. The promotion is officially yours." He placed a thick folder on the table. Izara looked at it. Her name was printed across the front. Everything she had worked for was sitting right in front of her. She reached toward the folder, then stopped. Her fingers began to tremble. "What happens if I don't sign it?" she asked. Her manager looked surprised. "Why wouldn't you?" Izara looked through the glass wall at the city. "I don't know." And that was the problem. She didn't know. She only knew that something inside her was screaming, "Wait." Her manager pushed the folder closer. "You've worked for this for years." Those words hit harder than he expected. Years. She remembered the late nights, the missed weekends, the birthdays she skipped, the opportunities she ignored because she believed success meant staying on one path long enough to prove herself. She looked down at the contract again. Then her phone vibrated. One notification. No name. No number. Just one message. "The door you are afraid to close is blocking the door you are meant to open." Izara's face went pale. She slowly looked toward the office doorway. Nobody was there. She turned back to her phone. The message had disappeared. Now there was only a blank screen. And suddenly, the promotion didn't feel like an opportunity. It felt like a test. But here's where things become interesting. Because career shifts rarely begin with a new job. They often begin with a new question. You start asking, what do I actually want? What am I doing this for? Who am I trying to impress? What would I choose if I wasn't afraid of starting again? You may be asking those questions too. Maybe you have been feeling pulled towards something different. A business. A creative path. Technology. Teaching. Leadership. A completely different industry. Or maybe you don't even know what the next path is yet. And that's okay. You don't need the entire map. You only need enough courage to stop walking in the wrong direction. Izara closed the folder. Her manager stared at her. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "No." She took a breath. "But I know I can't sign this yet." She walked out. For the first time in years, she had no plan. And strangely, she felt lighter. But as she reached the elevator, she noticed something scratched into the metal doors. A symbol. A circle surrounded by 3 thin lines. She had seen it before. Not at work. Not online. Years ago. In an old book her grandfather had given her when she was a child. A book she had completely forgotten about. The elevator doors opened. Izara stepped inside. Before the doors closed, her phone vibrated one more time. This time there was no message. There was an address. An old library on the other side of the city. And underneath it, "If you want to know why your path changed, come alone." Izara stared at the screen. She knew she should ignore it. Every logical part of her mind said to go home. But another part, the part that had been silent for years, was already telling her to go. So she did. And what she found inside that forgotten library would make her question whether her career shift had really started that morning, or whether it had been preparing for her all along. The library stood at the end of a narrow street, hidden between 2 buildings that looked almost abandoned. Izara stopped outside. For a moment, she wondered if she had made a mistake. The windows were dusty. The wooden door was old. There was no sign, no name, nothing that suggested anyone still used the place. She checked the address again. It was correct. She pushed the door open. A long hallway stretched into darkness. Then, a small light came on. Izara took 1 step forward. Another light turned on. Then another. One by one, the lights guided her deeper into the building. She reached a huge room filled with bookshelves. Thousands of books surrounded her. But something was strange. There were no normal titles. Every book had a single word written on its spine. Choice. Fear. Talent. Purpose. Failure. Opportunity. Change. Izara slowly walked between the shelves. Her fingers touched one book after another. Then she stopped. There, on a shelf near the back, was the symbol from the elevator. The same circle. The same 3 lines. And underneath it was a word she had not seen in years. Resonance. Her breathing became slow. She pulled the book from the shelf. Dust fell from the cover. When she opened it, the first page contained a handwritten sentence. She recognized the handwriting immediately. It was her grandfather's. Her eyes widened. No. She turned the page. There was another sentence. Then another. Her grandfather had written about something he called the career threshold. According to him, there came a point in some people's lives when their old path stopped matching their inner direction. He described it like a radio losing connection with one station and suddenly finding another. Most people ignored it. They stayed where they were. They chose comfort. They chose approval. They chose the familiar. And eventually, the signal became so quiet that they forgot it had ever existed. Izara kept reading. Then she reached a page that made her hands freeze. Her name was written there. Not her grandfather's name. Not a random example. Her name. Izara. Below it was a date. Tomorrow's date. She dropped the book. For several seconds, she could not move. How could he know? Then she noticed something else. A second line had been written beneath her name. When the opportunity arrives, she will think it is the answer. Izara's heart began racing. That was exactly what had happened. The promotion. The contract. The opportunity she had spent years waiting for. It had arrived. And somehow, her grandfather had predicted that she would mistake it for her final destination. But there was one more line. She leaned closer. If she walks away, the real signal will begin. The lights suddenly flickered. Izara looked up. The library became completely silent. Then she heard footsteps. Someone was walking toward her. Slowly. One step. Then another. She turned around. An elderly woman stood at the end of the aisle. She held a small golden key in her hand. Izara recognized her face. She had seen her once before. At her grandfather's funeral. The woman looked at the open book. Then at Izara. You finally came. Izara could barely speak. You knew about this? The woman nodded. Your grandfather knew this day would come. Why didn't he tell me? The woman looked toward the shelves. Because you wouldn't have believed him. Izara swallowed. What happens now? The woman walked closer. She placed the golden key in Izara's hand. Now you stop asking what career will make you successful. She paused. And you start asking what kind of person you are becoming. Izara looked at the key. It was warm. Almost strangely warm. The woman pointed toward a door hidden behind the shelves. Izara had never noticed it before. There is one room in this library that only opens when someone is ready. Izara stared at the door. Ready for what? The woman smiled. To see the opportunity you were too afraid to choose. Izara stepped toward it. Her hand tightened around the key. But before she could reach the lock, the woman said something that stopped her completely. Be careful, Izara. She turned. Why? The woman's expression changed. Because once you see what is behind that door, you may realize your old career was never your real career at all. Izara looked back at the door. The golden key slowly moved toward the lock. And somewhere deep inside her, something shifted. Not her job. Not her circumstances. Her identity. Because sometimes your biggest career breakthrough does not begin when someone offers you a new position. It begins when you finally stop accepting the old version of yourself. Your next chapter begins the moment your old identity can no longer convince you to stay. Izara inserted the key and turned it. The door opened. The room behind the door was nothing like Izara expected. There was no treasure. No desk. No person waiting for her. Only darkness. And at the center of the room, a single chair facing a huge glass wall. Beyond the glass was something impossible. A city. But not the city she knew. It was brighter, calmer, almost unreal. Tall buildings rose into a golden sky. Roads of light moved between them. Thousands of people walked with purpose, each one moving towards something instead of simply moving through the day. Izara stepped closer. What am I looking at? The elderly woman stood behind her. Possibility. Izara stared at the city. Then she noticed something strange. There were several versions of the same person walking through different parts of it. A young man carrying a camera. A woman standing in a classroom. Someone working at a computer. A doctor. An artist. A business owner. A designer. Different lives. Different choices. Different futures. The woman spoke quietly. Every major career shift begins long before the outside world can see it. Izara looked confused. What does that mean? It means the future doesn't always arrive as an opportunity. Sometimes it first arrives as discomfort. Those words stayed with her. Because suddenly, she remembered everything. The mornings she woke up without excitement. The projects that once felt meaningful but now felt empty. The people she had outgrown. The ideas she kept writing in notebooks but never acted on. The strange pull towards something she could not name. Maybe none of those feelings had been random. Maybe they were signals. Izara sat down. What am I supposed to do? The woman smiled. You already know. No, I don't. Yes, you do. Izara looked down. Her fingers tightened. Then one memory came back. She was 16 years old, sitting beside her grandfather in the same library. She had told him she wanted to create something of her own. She wanted to build things. She wanted to solve problems. She wanted to make something that could help people. Her grandfather had smiled and asked, "Then why are you waiting?" At 16, she had laughed. At 25, she had forgotten. At 30, she had built an entire career around something else. Now she understood. She had not lost her direction. She had buried it. And maybe you have done something similar. Maybe there is a version of you that you stopped listening to because life became practical. Bills became important. Other people's opinions became louder. Fear became reasonable. You told yourself, maybe later. Maybe next year. Maybe when I'm ready. But here's what no one tells you. Sometimes later becomes a habit. And eventually, the life you wanted becomes a life you only imagine. Izara stood up. I think I know what I have to do. The woman nodded. Then why are you still afraid? Izara looked through the glass. Because if I leave my career, I might fail. The woman stepped closer. And if you stay? Izara said nothing. That question hurt more than the first one, because she already knew the answer. If she stayed, she might become successful at a life she never truly wanted. And that was a different kind of failure. A deeper one. The room suddenly began to shake. The golden city beyond the glass started fading. The woman pointed toward the wall. Your time is almost up. Izara looked at her. What time? The threshold only stays open for those willing to choose. Then the glass changed. Instead of the golden city, Izara saw herself. Older. Sitting alone in the same office. The same desk. The same walls. The same title. The same life. She looked exhausted. Then the image changed. Another version of Izara appeared. She was standing in front of a small group of people, explaining an idea she had once been too afraid to pursue. She looked nervous, but alive. Izara stared at both futures. Neither one was guaranteed. One was safe. The other was uncertain. And suddenly she understood something powerful. The choice was not between success and failure. It was between staying familiar and becoming who she was capable of becoming. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, I choose the unknown. The lights went out. When they came back on, the room was empty. The elderly woman was gone. The golden city was gone. The door behind her was closed. And in Izara's hand was one final thing. A small piece of paper. Only 4 words were written on it. Your real work begins tomorrow. Izara looked at the message. Tomorrow. Again. But this time, she wasn't afraid. She smiled. because she finally understood that the career shift she had been waiting for was never going to come from outside first. It had to begin inside. And maybe that is why you are watching this right now. Maybe you are not being pushed away from your old path. Maybe you are being pulled towards something that finally fits. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not starting from zero. You are carrying everything you learned into the next chapter. And if you have been feeling that strange pull lately, pay attention. Because the signal may already be getting stronger. But there is one final thing Izara had not yet discovered. The career she was about to build was connected to a decision she had made years earlier. A decision she had completely forgotten. And when that memory returned, everything changed again. 3 days passed. Izara had resigned from her position. There were questions. There were doubts. Some people told her she was making a terrible mistake. Others quietly admired her courage. But every night, when she sat alone with her thoughts, one question kept returning. What am I supposed to do now? She had walked away from the old path, but she still couldn't see the new one. And that scared her. Because leaving something behind feels powerful for a moment, until you realize you still have to build what comes next. One evening, Izara opened an old box she had kept in the back of her closet. She wasn't looking for anything specific. She simply wanted to find something that might remind her of who she had been before fear became part of every decision. Inside were old photographs, school certificates, a broken watch, a few letters. And then she found a small notebook. Her grandfather's handwriting was on the first page. Izara sat down. She slowly turned the pages. Most of them contained strange notes about people, ideas, choices, and patterns. Then she reached the final page. There was a date from 15 years earlier, and beneath it, her name. Izara's breathing stopped. She read the sentence. Today, Izara told me what she wants to create. She kept reading. She thinks she wants a career, but what she really wants is to solve a problem. Izara frowned. She turned the page. There was no next page. The notebook ended there. She stared at it for several seconds. Then a memory came rushing back. She was 16 again, sitting beside her grandfather. She had been frustrated because she couldn't decide what career to choose. He had asked her a simple question. What problem in the world makes you angry enough to want to fix it? At the time, she had laughed. She had given him an answer without thinking. I hate watching people struggle with things that technology could make easier. Her grandfather had looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, Don't choose a job, Izara. Find the problem you cannot stop thinking about. She had forgotten those words. For 15 years. She had forgotten. Izara closed the notebook. Her eyes filled with tears. Because suddenly, everything connected. Her old career. Her restlessness. The strange ideas she had written down. The moments when she wanted to build something. The reason she had always felt trapped by jobs that only asked her to complete tasks instead of solve meaningful problems. She wasn't searching for another position. She was searching for a purpose hidden inside a problem. And that realization changed her next move. The following morning, she opened her laptop. She started researching. Not jobs. Not salaries. Problems. She wrote down everything that bothered her. Then she asked herself, what could I build? The question opened something inside her. Hours passed. She didn't notice. She forgot to eat. She forgot to check her phone. For the first time in years. Work did not feel like work. It felt like discovery. And maybe you know that feeling. There is a difference between being busy and being deeply engaged. There is a difference between earning money and building something that feels connected to who you are. Sometimes your next career is hiding inside the thing you naturally spend hours trying to understand. The subject you keep returning to. The problem you keep noticing. The idea you cannot stop thinking about. That may be your signal. But Izara's story was about to take another unexpected turn. Late that evening, she received an email. No company logo. No introduction. Just one sentence. We saw what you built. Izara froze. She hadn't published anything. She hadn't told anyone. She opened the email. There was an attachment. A single document. Inside was a description of the exact problem she had been researching. Someone had already been working on it, and they were looking for someone with her exact skills. At the bottom was a meeting time. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Izara stared at the screen. Then she noticed the sender's name. Her grandfather's old friend. The same woman from the library. Izara whispered. How? Then another message appeared. You were never meant to find the opportunity. You were meant to become ready for it. She leaned back in her chair. Now she understood. The promotion she had rejected was not the opportunity. The library was not the opportunity. The mysterious messages were not the opportunity. They had only been preparing her to recognize the real one. And that changes something for you too. Because you may be waiting for your big break. But what if your real preparation is happening right now? The skills you're learning. The failures you're experiencing. The people you're meeting. The things you're outgrowing. Even the doors that closed. They may all be shaping your ability to recognize the right door when it finally opens. The right opportunity does not always arrive when you want it. It arrives when you are finally ready to use it. Izara looked at the clock. 8:47 p.m. Tomorrow was only 12 hours away. She closed the laptop. For the first time, she wasn't asking, what if I fail? She was asking, what if this is the beginning? And somewhere across the city, someone was preparing a room for her. Someone who knew her grandfather. Someone who knew about the library. And someone who had been waiting for Izara to make one decision. The decision to stop asking for permission to become who she was meant to be. But when Izara walked into that meeting the next morning, she discovered that the person waiting for her had one final question. A question that would determine whether she was truly ready for the career shift that had been building around her all along. At exactly 9 a.m., Izara entered the building. It was smaller than she expected. No glass towers. No crowded lobby. No huge company logo. Just a quiet room with a long wooden table and several people sitting around it. At the end of the table was the elderly woman from the library. She stood as Izara entered. You came. Izara nodded. I had to. The woman smiled. I know. Izara sat down. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then the woman placed a folder in front of her. This is the project. Izara opened it. The first pages described a problem she had been studying for months. But the deeper she went, the more familiar it became. Someone had taken several of her old ideas and turned them into a real project. Izara looked up. Who gave you these? The woman didn't answer. Instead, she asked, what do you think is missing? Izara looked back at the pages. She read them again. Then she noticed something. The technology is good, she said slowly. But you're solving the wrong part of the problem. Everyone at the table became silent. The woman leaned forward. Explain. Izara pointed to the document. You are trying to make people work faster. She paused. But that's not why they're struggling. She turned another page. They're overwhelmed because the system was designed around the company, not the person using it. One of the people at the table exchanged a glance with another. Izara continued. If you fix that, everything changes. The woman smiled. Not because Izara had given the correct answer, but because she had finally started thinking like herself again. Then the woman asked the question Izara had been waiting for. Do you want the position? Izara looked at the folder. The old version of her would have immediately asked about the salary, the title, the benefits, the security. But this time, she asked something different. What problem are you asking me to solve? The woman smiled. Exactly. Izara understood. This wasn't another job. It was an invitation to build something. Something connected to the question she had asked as a teenager. Something her grandfather had seen in her before she could see it herself. The woman pushed the folder toward her. Your grandfather believed you would eventually reach this point. Izara's eyes became wet. He knew? He didn't know exactly what you would build. She paused. He only knew you would spend years trying to become successful, before realizing success wasn't the real goal. Izara looked down. How long have you been waiting? The woman answered quietly. Since the day your grandfather died. Silence filled the room. Then she said something Izara would never forget. He asked me to wait until you were ready, not until you were successful. Izara closed her eyes. That sentence hit deeper than anything else. Because suddenly, she understood what had been happening. The rejection. The confusion. The career that stopped feeling right. The promotion that arrived at the wrong moment. The mysterious messages. The library. The golden key. None of it had magically created her future. It had simply forced her to pay attention to a future she had ignored. And maybe that is what is happening to you. Maybe your current frustration is not proof that you are failing. Maybe it is proof that something inside you has changed. Maybe you are being pushed to learn a skill you never thought you needed. Maybe you are meeting people who will change your direction. Maybe an opportunity you wanted is disappearing because something better requires you to move differently. Maybe the door closing is not punishment. Maybe it is redirection. Take a breath and think about your own life. What keeps returning to your mind? What idea refuses to disappear? What skill do you secretly wish you had? What would you try if you knew nobody would laugh at you? And what would you do if fear stopped making your decisions? Don't rush to answer. Just listen. Because sometimes the first sign of a career shift is not excitement. It is discomfort. You begin noticing that your old life doesn't fit the person you are becoming. You stop wanting applause for things that no longer matter. You start craving meaning instead of approval. You become curious again, and that curiosity can become a signal. Izara signed the agreement. But before she left, the woman handed her the golden key again. Izara looked confused. I thought this opened the library. It did. Then why are you giving it back to me? The woman smiled. Because the library was never the real door. Izara looked at the key. Then what is? The woman pointed toward the window. Your next decision. Izara looked outside. The city was moving as it always had. Cars. People. Buildings. Noise. Nothing looked different. But she was different. And sometimes, that's how a new chapter begins. The world doesn't change first. You do. Then your choices change. Then your direction changes. Then, slowly, your life begins to look different. Izara walked outside. She stopped on the sidewalk. For the first time, she didn't know exactly where her career would take her. And strangely, she was okay with that. Because she had finally stopped demanding certainty before taking the next step. She looked at the golden key in her hand. Then she smiled. And somewhere deep inside, she heard the answer she had been waiting for. Not a voice. Not a prediction. Not a mysterious transmission. Just a quiet certainty. You are ready. And maybe you are too. You may not have the complete plan yet. You may not know what your next job will be. You may not know which opportunity will appear. You may even feel like your career is falling apart. But remember this. A career shift can feel like the end of your path, when it is actually the beginning of your real one. So don't panic when something changes. Pay attention. When one door closes, ask what it is teaching you. When you outgrow a role, ask what new skill is trying to emerge. When you feel lost, ask what part of yourself you stopped listening to. And when the right opportunity finally appears, don't ask only, is this safe? Ask, does this move me closer to who I want to become? Because your next chapter may already be forming, quietly, behind the scenes. Through every skill you are learning, every connection you are making, every failure you are surviving, every old version of yourself you are finally releasing. You are not starting over. You are starting from everything you have learned. And if you have been feeling that something is about to change, don't ignore that feeling. But don't blindly follow it either. Prepare. Learn. Build. Pay attention. Because when the door finally opens, you don't want to be wishing you were ready. You want to be able to walk through it. And there is one final practice that can help you recognize that door when it appears. A simple question Izara learned in that library. A question that can reveal more about your next career move than years of overthinking ever could.